Let's talk about dealing with anxiety in ministry. Us ministers have a perfect setup for being anxious about the jobs that we do. We love pleasing people, and we are put in a position of speaking difficult messages to the people who voluntarily give to fund our paycheck. That is an awkward position, and that can cause a lot of anxiety. Think about for a moment. This is hard for people who are not in ministry to relate to, but your minister has all of their social and financial and spiritual and relational circles all in one circle. Their best friends, their location, their kids' schools, their church family, their employment are all in the same circle. So if they get fired, they have to, all those circles break up. They've got to sell their home, change their kids' schools, find a new job, make a move, probably not going to stay in the same town. For most people, if you get let go on a job, you can keep your church, you can keep your friends, you can keep most of your circles, just have to change the employment circle. This is a recipe for ministers to feel a lot of anxiety because there's somewhat of a conflict of interest in this idea that we're tasked with prophetically and biblically and boldly proclaiming these truths and challenging people with the scriptures who don't really want to be challenged with the scriptures and who pay our paycheck, whether or not they decide to give or not give, or how they're feeling that day, or even the kind of things that people complain about or hand off to the elders are tremendous sources of worry and anxiety for ministers. I ran a survey in 2017 asking ministers about their anxiety and depression levels. 52% of ministers in Churches of Christ expressed anxiety directly related to ministry in Churches of Christ. Another 34% associated with feelings of significant to severe depression based upon their ministry. Now, this is not a Church of Christ only thing, I understand that, but those are the people who I was asking about this. So we have to deal with people in the most sensitive areas of their life with biblical truths, all while in our minds and our personalities just trying to make people happy. We love making people happy. We entered into a profession of a helping profession, ministry, to help people feel good, to help people get close to God, to make an eternal difference, and to help people feel good. And those are, and we think somehow that we can help make that happen, like that we are responsible for people's happiness, for people's anxiety or lack thereof, for the calmness, the peacefulness of the congregation. That's not all on us. And so, it's hard to both be tasked with saying hard things and making people happy, but that's where we find ourselves as people pleasers and ministers in church congregational ministry. So how do we deal with people who are anxious? Not just our own anxiety, because ministry can make us anxious, but we also think about the people out in the congregation as we're teaching and preaching and saying all the things that we're saying very publicly. Imagine being on record for an hour or 2 to 3 hours a week, and everything that you say is being recorded. People are taking notes, coming back and use things against you. That's very anxiety producing on our end, but it's also anxiety producing on the congregation's end as they hear the things that we're saying and see the things that we're doing that can make people really nervous as they're thinking like, what's going on and what's changing and what's going to happen next and what are we challenging or not challenging and where are we headed and what's the vision, what's the direction, and how is this preacher informing this and how are the elders informing this. There's a lot of anxiety in congregations, and so here's the key. You're not ever going to keep people from being anxious. You can guard your words, you can sugarcoat things, but see, then you're not doing your job. If you're going to choose to do your job, which is important, then you will never be guaranteed with making sure everyone's happy and okay and pleased and comfortable. You cannot both do your job in the prophetic role of ministry, teaching biblical truths with zeal and conviction. It doesn't mean be a jerk. I'm just saying to be faithful to the task. You cannot be faithful to the task and also guarantee that everyone's okay all the time. You can never guarantee that everyone's okay all the time, even if you do a sloppy job in your ministry and always sugarcoat everything. So how do you deal with this? How do we then deal with the reality that some people are going to be upset and some people are going to be anxious no matter what you do? Here's the key. It's called self-differentiation. It is the difference between me and you. It is the boundary that is between the identity of who I am and who you are, that we are not the same person. And us as ministers have a real propensity to enmesh ourselves into the emotional systems and processes of the very people that we minister to, so that if you are not okay, then I become not okay, that I can only be okay if everyone else seems to be okay. And so we're constantly gauging, constantly putting the thermometer out there to see who's okay and who's not. And I'm losing sleep or not losing sleep over the fact that everyone's okay or everyone's not okay. And this is not a healthy way to do ministry. You have to know where you end and where other people begin. And if you don't know the difference, you will be enmeshed, and you will allow other people's feelings and other people's worries and anxieties to map over onto yours. And we also fool ourselves into thinking that we can be the catalyst or the mechanism by which everyone becomes okay. We like to be the fixer. We like to be the person who has the words to say the magic things to make everybody okay. Doesn't work. Not going to happen. Give up on it, because you cannot, again, be faithful to your biblical duty and make sure everyone's okay. Not ever going to work. Didn't even work for Jesus, the Son of God. He said things that made people anxious. Guess what? If we're even following the example and ministry of Jesus, we say things, people are going to get anxious. When we speak the truth, people are going to get anxious. That doesn't mean go around being obnoxious, go around being a jerk, trying to offend people. None of that. We go about it truth and love, grace and truth, just as Jesus did. But people are not going to be okay. We got to learn to handle it. And the way we handle it comes down to the way that we view ourselves. Do I see myself as the ultimate fixer of other people? Do I also see myself as someone who has no control over my own emotions, no control over my own systems, my own state of being, and it's all based on how other people are doing? That's enmeshment. That's codependence. Never going to work. Not ever going to be healthy. You will not ever please everyone. You will rarely please anyone in the things that you say and do. Are you faithful to your calling, and are you well enough differentiated and non-enmeshed with other people to know who you are and who they are, and that if they're not okay, you can still be okay? Because you can't live your life that way, to not allow other people to make you anxious. So let's get real practical here. Church decides to do something new. They study it, they communicate it, they implement it, they put it out there. How long does this new move last? Does it last to the degree that the church leadership is committed to the idea, committed to the decision? How committed are they? Sometimes leadership is only committed as they are to the person with the lowest anxiety threshold in the congregation. So think about it like this. If you just make a mundane move, we're changing the color of the pew. Everyone's like, yeah, not a big deal. You make another move that says, we're going to pass communion different. We're going to change the worship order. So the church leadership decides to take this new direction. They implement it. What happens next? They begin getting complaints. Will they change course, or will they carry on? What is the durability of the decision-making processes and implementation and execution of church leadership? Will the decision be derailed by the most anxious person in the room? Will the decision be derailed by the person who has the lowest threshold for anxiety in the room? So think about this. Not just one person, not just 10 people, 400 people. How many people do you have in the room who have an extremely low threshold of anxiety? In the bottom 1%, that'd be 4 people. In the bottom half of 1% of 400 people, that would be 2 people. In the bottom 1/4% of anxiety thresholds in the population, you will have one of those people. If decisions are hinged on the lowest 1/4% of anxiety threshold people in the congregation, it will only take one person in a church of 400 to derail weeks and months of prayer, discernment, study, and execution, and all of the ammunition that the church leadership expends to make something happen, to be derailed by one person who's not even thought about it, prayed about it, studied it, worried about it. They just saw it and reacted and responded. And then the leadership, if they are enmeshed and codependent, will react and respond just like they did. And now you have a reactionary environment of codependence and enmeshment that will never result in healthy systems that carry out healthy ministry. Let's say the preacher says something and it aggravates somebody, and they come and talk to the elders. What do the elders do about that? And enmeshed codependent eldership will say, oh, don't worry about that. It'll be just fine. We're going to go talk to the minister, and we're going to correct him and make sure that he knows never to say that again. Don't worry about it. It'll be okay. See what they're doing? They're saying, anxious member, anxious eldership. We will bring the anxiety level down so you can bring the anxiety level down, and then everything's okay, but not everything's okay. That's never the way to operate. It's not Matthew 18. It's not how you reconcile relationships. That's called triangulation. You have the minister and the member, and they leverage in the eldership in order to bring leverage against the minister because they're the power, people in authority who then can bring everything back in line. Rather than going this direction, we end up going in a triangle, and that's not Matthew 18. That's not what Jesus desires or intends for us. And so enmeshment of emotions are when you allow someone else's emotions, anxiety, depression, worry, stress to map over into yourself. You, because of your lack of boundaries and because of your lack of healthy, mature self-differentiation, you have an open border policy for other people's emotions to flood in and for you to readily receive those things and accept those things and live into those same feelings without any boundaries or stop signs or red lights to say, this is not welcome here. Your feelings are not going to become my feelings, or my feelings your feelings. We're going to have to work on these things as individuals, but we can still work on them together. So how do you learn to live around anxious people? And how do you learn to deal with your own anxiety? Self-differentiation. To reject enmeshment, that your feelings become my feelings. To reject codependency, which is so prevalent in ministers that I think I can fix you and that you want me to fix you. And so I'm going to say the magic words and do the magic things to make sure you're okay. And that people in the congregation readily receive the minister fixing things for them, rather than them raising their maturity level by the minister not engaging in the fix for the people in the congregation to live and stir in their anxiety for a while so that they become more anxiety tolerant, which is an increase in their maturity level. So think about this. If every moment in your life you were ever anxious, someone came alongside you and coddled you, you would never grow in your ability to tolerate anxiety. But if you're anxious and people allow you to be anxious, you can learn to be okay in the midst of things that make you anxious. You may actually learn not to be so anxious about the things that make you anxious because you've learned that without other people coming in and jumping in and fixing everything for me, I've learned to deal with things on my own, and I then have developed my own coping mechanisms and my own ability to see that there is life beyond this thing that makes me so nervous. I'm able to produce that on my own. I don't need anyone then to come and fix this for me, and that allows me also then to be self-differentiated. Know who you are, know who you're not, own your own emotions, don't let anyone else dictate your emotions. And yes, if someone's sad, you can be sad. I'm not saying be a stone, be a rock. I'm not saying that. We should be people of love and mercy and compassion. But being a codependent, enmeshed minister is not mercy or compassion. It derails people's spiritual and emotional processes that allow them to grow and go on to maturity. God bless. Thanks for watching. Make sure to hit the subscribe if you'd like to see more things like this. And please pray for this ministry, for wineskins.org, that God will continue to use us for the growth of the kingdom and to help us to continue to dive in to difficult conversations in order to grow into a more robust faith in view of God, in relationship with Jesus Christ, the power of the Spirit. God bless.